Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this first day of December. Well, here we are, December, and what a yucky start to December in Brisbane. 17 degrees and raining, and it is cloudy and grey and a yucky sort of a day out there. But it is what it is, so let's get on with the news for today and see what's making news. And congratulations to Socceroos, that amazing win, and see how this will be celebrated on the streets. And how about that, Well, Socceroos World Cup fixtures results. The Socceroos are through to the round of 16 of 2022 World Cup after 1-0 win over Denmark. And as you can see from that celebration, it is the big breaking news. The Socceroos are through. Australia hadn't reached the knockout stages since 2006. But a Matthew Leckie strike proved the difference in the final group game. The win was crucial as Tunisia beat France 1-0, meaning a Socceroos draw would have been enough. Graham Arnold's side will now play Lionel Messi's Argentina in round of the 16 on Sunday, December 4th. And the Socceroos were drawn in Group D for 2022 World Cup, where they faced France, Denmark and Tunisia. Notably, Australia shared a group with France and Denmark in the 2018 tournament too. In those matches, the green and gold fell valiantly to the Les Blues 2-1 and drew with Denmark 1-1. While the Socceroos lost 4-1 to France in Qatar, this time round they went on to claim 1-0 wins against both Tunisia and Denmark to progress to round of 16. And congratulations, and what a great news. You'll find that over social media and everything. It's such a wonderful news. And wow, we might be heading towards a national holiday, who knows. Well, right now, moving on, China restrictions ease, but there are still firm on the COVID-0 policy.
Give us your thoughts on a country at this stage of the pandemic sticking to this largely eradication policy.
Well, the problem right now is China is in a very difficult situation because it's controlling COVID through, as you're saying, this COVID-0 policy. And most countries, what they did when they were trying to achieve COVID-0, so like Australia, was they were trying to get their population as vaccinated as possible so they're prepared when things opened. And what you're seeing in China is that they've had this period of time, the 3-year period, to get prepared for opening, but they really haven't adequately prepared. And what do I mean by that? Well, when we're looking at the number of people vaccinated, overall in China, the vaccination rate's pretty good. It's 87% or so. But in Australia, the people that are most vaccinated are those that are most at risk of dying of COVID, so elderly folk. In China, it's the opposite. So actually, there's vaccine hesitancy, and the rate of vaccination is lower in people over age 80 than in younger people. So that means that when China opens, there's going to be a substantial number of people dying and overwhelmed hospital systems. And China just hasn't to date done enough to catch up in terms of vaccination. They're starting to, but it's a little bit too late.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. They did say this week that they were going to ramp up the vaccinations of the elderly, but in terms of this wave, they can't necessarily keep it at bay in terms of managing that possible impact on the health system.
Well, China is able to do things that other countries are not able to do. And the rate of boosters of people age 80 and over was only 40% 2 weeks ago and is now already above 65%. So that's really quite remarkable. But when you compare it to Australia, in Australia we have, much higher rates, over 90% in over 65s. So we're just much more protected than China is at the current time. The other thing is the vaccines that have been used in China, they're Chinese-made vaccines. They use killed virus. It's a kind of an old-fashioned way of making vaccines. They're just not as effective. So you have the population less vaccinated, at least those most at risk, with vaccines that are less effective. So there's no way the healthcare system is really ready for it at this point.
Yeah.
So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
There you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. This is the China's policy, and they're doing the best they can. Well, right now, closing the gap shows progress.
Another report with little improvement for First Nations Australians.
What we face is not a gap, but a chasm.
The annual Closing the Gap report has once again shown only a handful of the 18 targets are being met, and some are getting worse.
It confirms that in far too many measurable ways, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples lead lives of lesser opportunity.
I am frustrated by the lack of progress.
Healthy birth weights, preschool enrolments and reducing the number of children in detention are all on track. But deaths by suicide, adult incarceration rates and child removals are all increasing.
What a situation feels like. Progress, then setback. Hope, then despair.
The 4 key areas that are not being met, they go hand in hand. It is a poverty narrative.
Experts say the government already has the information it needs to address the problems.
The Bringing Them Home report was tabled 25 years ago, and that spoke very clearly to the need for more self-determination in these systems.
I want to see mass investments into incarceration, into suicide, into child removals. I'm talking about at least $1 billion in each and every single one of those.
Insufficient monitoring means it's unclear whether several key targets are progressing or not, and the government has already flagged it wants better data collection from the states and territories. That will likely be a key part of the implementation plan to close the gap, to be handed down early next year. Dana Morse, ABC News.
How do we meet those targets, and how do we close the gap? That is always challenging. Well, on one hand, we're trying to make sure that the laws of the land are being upheld. Number two, we also need to be very aware of the sensitivities that surround the cultural heritage part as well. Well, right now, for the first time in Australia, a Prime Minister has been censured in Parliament.
One day you'll have one.
In time, every Prime Minister is honoured on canvas.
While there are invariably between them storms past and storms future, there should always be bonds of mutual respect.
Scott Morrison weathering a tempest of his own.
Mr Speaker, today is not how any of us wanted to make history.
Parliamentary condemnation for secretly appointing himself to 5 extra ministries during the COVID pandemic.
The member for Cook in doing this did not just fall below the standards expected. He undermined them, he rejected them, he attacked them, and he abused them.
I have no intention now, Mr Speaker, of submitting to the political intimidation of this government.
The former PM indignant and defiant, conceding only that his ministerial moonlighting hadn't been necessary in hindsight.
The politics of retribution and nothing less. Sure. These are the behaviours of an opposition, Mr Speaker, not a government who understands that grace in victory is a virtue.
We got hubris, and we got arrogance, and we got denial.
A lone Liberal joining the castigation.
I do not accept any of the explanations put forward by the former Prime Minister for his actions.
Then crossing the floor.
Ayes 86, noes 50.
Though it carries no material consequence, a censure is Parliament's strongest expression of rebuke. Scott Morrison's punishment is his humiliation and the stain on his legacy as PM. All on a day that saw the culmination of the long political battle over integrity. Labor's promised National Anti-Corruption Commission becoming law.
This is a day that will change politics for the better.
The gift of hope. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The gift of hope for a better future, we really, really hope so.
I, some time ago, made my point that enough is enough. It is time for this matter to be brought to a conclusion. In that, I don't express any personal sympathy with some of the actions of Mr Assange. I do say, though, that this issue has gone on for many years now, and when you look at the issue of Mr Assange and compare that with the person responsible for leaking the information, Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, she is now able to participate freely in US society. The government will continue to act in a diplomatic way, but can I assure the member for Kooyong that I have raised this personally with representatives of the United States government.
And as the Prime Minister mentioned, that it's about time to put this to close. This has been going on for such a long time, and such a large sum of taxpayers' money has been used in trying to dig up and. Well, right now, desk cams, they capture all sorts of things. Here's a report.
Oh, right, gender reveal. It's a boy. Yeah, you can't drive at the moment, it's too... Feeling good all day. Brisbane's widest variety of music from the 80s. Yeah.
So there you are, up to date on Australian Indian radio, things that people will do. Well, inflation, where are we with inflation at this point in time?
Higher costs are starting to hit this beauty salon and e-commerce business.
Our rent and utility bills, they've increased. Even small things like salon consumables, for example. I know it sounds silly, but like tissues have gone up in prices, and we use a lot of them at the salon.
They're starting to pass on those costs to their customers.
It could be anywhere from a few dollars to $5 more.
The latest inflation data shows rents have jumped and there was no let-up in the costs for new home builds. Surprisingly, consumer prices eased in the year to October, back to 6.9%. Fruit and vegetables were key to the decline, with price rises slowing from 17% in the 12 months to September to 9%. In the same period, travel costs eased. Fuel prices rose after the government reversed the excise discount.
It raises the possibility that perhaps we're seeing some easing of cost pressures coming through early, but I think overall it's likely that we will see inflation accelerate for the rest of the quarter.
The Treasurer says the latest numbers don't include the impact of the recent floods on grocery prices and higher energy bills.
Inflation is still hurting households. It's still the #1 challenge facing our economy.
The Reserve Bank predicts headline inflation will peak about 8% by the end of the year, which means it's unlikely to pause its rate hiking cycle just yet. In fact, most economists are tipping another rate rise next week. Rachel Papazzoni, ABC News.
And we'll have to wait and see what happens next Tuesday. Well, right now, let's go to the flood-prone areas.
hasn't really sunk in that the river's actually going to flood. Income over the next few months will absolutely be non-existent. There will be nothing.
Kylie Rocco has owned her own shop in Mannum on the Murray River for the past decade. But soon her business is likely to be inundated with floodwater.
Summer for us is normally, it's absolutely massive. Just chuck those in that box, gentlemen. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stock in here at the moment. Obviously that gets paid for after our season or during our season, which we're not going to have now.
South Australia is bracing for what could be its biggest floods in up to 70 years.
Our predictions, we're expecting between 3,500 and 4,000 properties to be inundated. Some of them are residents around holiday times, other people are residing there full time.
Kylie is unlucky. Had her business been on the other side of Mannum's main street, it could be protected by an emergency levy being built by the local council.
So where will the levy be built?
So to my knowledge, on this side of the road, up the main street, 2.8 metres high.
What impact did the last big flood have?
So from what I've been told from previous owners of the building, the 74 flood, which is what they are predicting, was almost halfway up the door frame.
The levee's location means 12 low-lying businesses and homes will be exposed to the floodwaters.
It's not going to do anything to protect us at all. If it was behind us, yes, but it's in front of us, so it's leaving us on our own, really.
The local mayor says there were limited options for the levee's location.
We've had an external engineer, an internal engineer and then 2 government departments look at it. So we've gone with what we believe is the best option.
The river...
That might not be the best option, but that is the option that they're going with at this point in time. So the levies and other things, to me, they're still temporary fixes and they're not the best options. Well, right now, before we go to our daily India report, let's take a look at this report coming out of UK, where a royal aide apologises and resigns after making racist comments.
A British-born charity founder claims a royal aide repeatedly asked her questions about her race at a royal event. Ngozi Fulani attended a reception at Buckingham Palace aimed at raising awareness for gender-based violence, hosted by the Queen Consort earlier this week. Ms Fulani wrote online that while at the event, an aide repeatedly questioned her race, asking where she was really from and what part of Africa her people came from, after Ms Fulani told her she was British. Buckingham Palace has released a statement saying they investigated the incident and the individual involved apologises for their hurtful words and will step down from their honorary role. It's believed the comments were made by 83-year-old Lady Susan Hussey, Prince William's godmother and a former lady-in-waiting to the late Queen. A spokesperson for the Prince of Wales says racism has no place in our society, adding the comments were unacceptable and it is right that the individual has stepped aside with immediate effect.
That is such a good move because, yes, racism and racist remarks does not have any place in today's society. Well, it should never have been in any society, but today, more than ever now, with all the awareness that's out there in the community and everything like that, it has no place at all, especially at that level, and then coming out into the community. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and more on India and the Indian diaspora. India continues to make strides in the world of manufacturing and export of mobile phones as export numbers race past the 5 billion mark in record time. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed happiness over mobile phone exports getting more than double year on year from April to October of this fiscal. The mobile phone exports raced past the $5 billion mark within 7 months, which is more than double of the $2.2 billion that India clocked in the same period last year. In reply to a tweet of Minister of State for Electronics and IT Rajiv Chandrasekhar in this regard, Modi said that India continues to make strides in the world of manufacturing. It is expected that at the current pace, exports from India will surpass the entire fiscal year 22 figure by early December itself and end the fiscal year 2023 in the $8.5 to $9 billion range. India exported mobile phones worth $5.8 billion in the financial year 2022. Backed by the production-linked incentive scheme, Apple and Samsung contribute over 90% of India's mobile phone exports. As exports grow, India also reduced dependency on mobile imports to around 5% in financial year 22, from as high as 78% in 2014 to 15. India aims to export cell phones worth $60 billion by 2025 to 26. The PLI scheme has attracted the world's largest mobile phone companies such as Apple to expand operations and set up new bases in India. Infosys co-founder Nandan Nilekani sees India witnessing significant economic activity in the next decade on the back of digital commerce and government measures like GST and e-way bills.
Forecasting India's rise in the coming decade, Infosys Technologies co-founder and chairman Nandan Nilekani said on November 29th that India will witness significant economic activity over the next decade on the back of an open network for digital commerce, record aggregating system and government measures like GST, FASTag and e-way bills. Speaking at the 7th edition of the Global Technology Summit, he said, "There are three big things coming today which will over the next decade have more of an impact. I believe in the next 10 years, India is going to see a significant economic activity which is broad-based, inclusive and democratized. The first is ONDC, the second is the account aggregator framework, and the third is the transformation happening in the logistics sector due to government initiatives like GST, FASTag and the e-way bill," Nilekani said. Nilekani said he expects the ONDC, an initiative of the government to promote an open platform for all aspects of the exchange of goods and services through electronic networks, to begin soon. Account aggregator network, which again fundamentally is an idea that data should ultimately be used by people who generate the data. So individuals and small businesses can use the data to get access to multiple services like credit, etc. This record aggregating system is also a business for India's data empowerment architecture. The transformation happening in the logistics sector due to government initiatives like GST, FASTag and e-way bills have simplified the movement of goods and vehicles on the highways. Further, a variety of startup innovators, local delivery and intercity delivery are going to change the movement and delivery of goods, he said.
India has lifted the ban on exports of organic non-basmati rice as domestic market prices have moderated.
India on 29 November lifted the ban on exports of organic non-basmati rice, including broken rice, after the easing of domestic supplies at moderated prices. The government had in early September banned the export of broken rice with an aim to increase domestic availability. This followed a 20% duty on the export of non-basmati rice aimed at shoring up domestic supplies after prices surged in retail markets. In a notification, the Directorate General of Foreign Trade said the export of organic non-basmati rice, including organic non-basmati broken rice, will now be governed by rules that prevailed before the September ban. In September, India imposed a 20% export duty on rice, semi-milled and wholly milled rice and brown rice. According to data, the exports of non-basmati rice went up 5% in the first quarter of the fiscal, as in $1,566 million. Robust global demand and negligible inventories had pushed up mandi prices of basmati paddy earlier this month across the key rice-growing regions in Punjab, Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh. The wholesale market price of basmati paddy at Karnal in Haryana and Rajpura in Punjab was between 3,800 rupees and 4,000 rupees per quintal.
Indian market regulator SEBI has introduced a new framework to put a cap on the investment made by actively managed mutual fund schemes in a single company's debt instrument.
Capital Markets Regulator, Securities and Exchange Board of India on November 29th came out with a new framework that will put a cap on the investment made by actively managed mutual fund schemes in a single company's debt instrument.
At present, such caps are already in place for passive funds such as exchange-traded funds and index funds in a bid to effectively manage the risk associated with such investments. SEBI said in order to avoid inconsistency in investment by mutual funds in debt instruments of an issuer, irrespective of the scheme being actively or passively managed, it has been decided to introduce a similar credit rating-based single issuer limit for actively managed mutual fund schemes. Under this, a mutual fund scheme will not invest more than 10% of its net asset value in debt instruments and money market securities rated AAA by a credit rating agency. The single issuer limit on such securities rated AA is set at 8%, while the same is 6% and below for A-rated securities. The investment limits may be extended by up to 2% of the NAV of the scheme with prior approval of the Board of Trustees and Board of Directors of the asset management company, subject to compliance with the overall 12% limit. The new framework would be applicable for all the new schemes to be launched with effect from November 29, and existing schemes shall be grandfathered from these guidelines till the maturity of the underlying debt and money market securities. Tata Group and Singapore Airlines have agreed to merge Vistara Airlines into Air India. The merger is expected to be complete by March 2024. Tata Sons and Singapore Airlines on November 29th announced that they will merge Vistara into Air India with a target to complete the process by March 2024, subject to regulatory approvals. Once that happens, Tata Sons will hold a 74.9% stake in the AI Vistara AI Express Air Asia India Private Limited combined entity and SIA the remaining 25.1% stake. SIA will invest $250 million as soon as this integration is complete, valuing the new Air India at about $1 billion. SIA said it intends to fully fund this investment with its internal cash resources, which stood at 17.5 billion Singapore dollars as of September 30, 2022. SIA and Tata have also agreed to participate in additional capital injection to fund the growth and operations of the enlarged Air India in financial year 2022-23 and financial year 2023-24. Based on SIA's 25.1% stake post-completion, its share of any additional capital injection could be up to $615 million, payable only after the completion of the merger. Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran said the merger of Vistara and Air India is an important milestone in our journey to make Air India a truly world-class airline. We're transforming Air India with the aim of providing great customer experience every time for every customer. Chandrasekaran further noted that as part of the transformation, Air India is focusing on growing both its network and fleet, revamping its customer proposition, and enhancing safety, reliability, and on-time performance. Air India and Vistara have a total of 218 wide bodies and narrow body aircraft, serving 38 international and 52 domestic destinations. With the integration, Air India will be the only Indian airline group to operate both full service and low-cost passenger services. The Reserve Bank of India will launch the pilot of its retail digital rupee on December 1st with the initial participation of 4 banks across Mumbai, New Delhi, Bengaluru and Bhubaneswar. The Reserve Bank of India is all set to launch its first pilot for retail digital rupee on December 1st. In an official release, the central bank said that the urgency would be in the form of a digital token that represents legal tender. It would be issued in the same denominations that paper currency and coins are currently issued, the release said. It further noted that the pilot would cover select locations in a closer user group comprising participating customers and merchants. The digital rupee will be distributed through banks and users will be able to transact with it through a digital wallet offered by the participating banks and stored on mobile phones or devices, the RBI said. However, as in the case of cash, the digital currency will not earn any interest and can be converted to other forms of money like deposits with banks. The central bank also said that transactions through ER can be both person to person and person to the merchant. The RBI said that it has identified 8 banks for phase-wise participation in this pilot. These include the State Bank of India, ICICI Bank, Yes Bank and IDFC First Bank. The 4 banks will participate in the first phase across 4 cities in the country. 4 more banks, namely Bank of Baroda, Union Bank of India, HDFC Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank will join this pilot subsequently, the RBI said. RBI said the pilot would initially cover 4 cities, viz. Mumbai, New Delhi, Bengaluru and Bhubaneswar, and later extended to Ahmedabad, Gangtok, Guwahati, Hyderabad, Indore, Kochi, Lucknow, Patna and Shimla. The scope of the pilot may be expanded gradually to include more banks, users and locations as needed. Zee Studios has released the trailer of Taapsee Pannu's murder mystery Blur. The film will have a direct OTT release on December 9th on ZEE5. Ever since the announcement of her upcoming murder mystery, fans of Bollywood actress Taapsee Pannu have been eagerly awaiting the release of the film. The actress shared the news on her social media handle. After getting a positive response for the teaser, the trailer of the film is out today, and we bet it will give you goosebumps. The trailer looks quite promising and is set amidst a dull winter setting. The trailer begins with a murder that appears to be of Taapsee Pannu's on-screen sister. The actress is searching for clues to reach to the mystery behind her sister's murder. There is a slight twist in the story when the doctor tells Taapsee that she is losing her eyesight and will go completely blind if she sees the daylight. The actor is then seen blindfolded at the end of the trailer. Sharing the film's motion poster on Twitter, Pannu wrote, "The film Blur will release on 9 December on ZEE5. Blur also features Gulshan Devaiah in an important role. The film is backed by Zee Studios and Outsiders Films and Eklon Productions and is written by Ajay Bahal and Pawan Soni. Directed by Ajay Bahal, Blur will release on 9 December on the OTT platform ZEE5.
और क्या क्या छुपाया मुझसे नहीं?
हर शहर की हर सड़क पर हजारों लोग हैं जो किसी को याद नहीं रहते।
आंखें बंद करके लोगों को देखो, बहुत बेहतर नजर आते हैं।
That's all for this bulletin of the Daily India Report.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Sorry, we lost the audio for a little while. I hope that didn't cause too much inconvenience. Well, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us. And as usual, it's always a great pleasure to have you on the show. Well, right now, it's time to say goodbye from the show.